Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of the Rooted Range podcast. I'm here with my friend Andrew Howell. No relation, he spells his name wrong. But anyway,
I'll check the dictionary on that one. But
okay. I know. I'm here with Andrew Howell of York Howell in Salt Lake City, and he and his partner David York wrote a book that was really influential in guiding me to this values methodology. And it's called Riveted, 44 Values That Change the World. And today we're going to discuss a little bit about Andrew's background and his decision to create a book related to values. We'll talk more about the book, especially two stories that are really fantastic about land or relate to land. We'll talk about estate planning as values expression, values in every decision, and then finally the COREnology tool that they use in their planning and that many financial planners and attorneys use nationwide. So let's go ahead and get started. Andrew, welcome. And let's start with the first one, your background and your role there at York Howell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And just a warning, my wife would tell everybody listening to this that this is going to be incredibly boring in terms of my background. I'm not that exciting, but so I'm an estate tax and asset protection attorney, and I've been practicing for 25 years. It feels like I've been practicing a lot longer than that. My whole family are attorneys. My dad was an attorney. Both my grandfathers were attorneys. My uncles are attorneys. My aunt was a judge. It's just the legal profession is our family business. And my grandfather, who was this huge influence in my life, my parents were divorced when I was pretty young. I was 4 years old, and my grandpa really stepped in to be much more my father figure than my real dad was. But he was really active. Now I didn't like it back then because I wanted to go on Saturday morning and ride bikes with my friends, and after school the last thing I wanted to do was go down to his law office and be a gopher. But he made me. Now I love him for it now, but back then I did not necessarily like it. And he didn't just have me work there, he immersed me in it. I mean, he kind of guided me into becoming an attorney, and I don't mind it. I absolutely really love what I do. Not many attorneys get to say that, but I think it's because I get to enjoy the attorney jokes because I don't feel like they apply to me because I don't go to court and sue people or whatever. But he practiced estate planning himself. He actually, my grandfather was born in Rexburg, Idaho in 1918. And my great-grandfather was a fur trapper who then became a potato farmer. And my grandpa was salt of the earth, grew up as poor as you can imagine, and worked hard to get out of it. Graduated valedictorian from the University of Utah and got accepted to Harvard Law School. And he did estate planning, what I do, and his clientele included, the Browning family, Disney, just really big families. And he was meeting with one of Utah's billionaires. And this guy owned Sinclair Oil. He owned a bunch of hotels throughout the country. And he was coming in to meet with my grandpa to talk about this new asset that he had purchased. And my grandpa said, "Hey, do you mind if my grandson comes in and he's interested in potentially be doing estate planning?" And and this gentleman's name is Earl Holding, was a fabulous guy. And he's like, "No, have him come in." And so I just sat there and kept my mouth shut, right? But I watched these two gentlemen have a discussion, and that's all it was. I'm sure they talked about the value of the asset that Earl had purchased, but what I remember them talking about is, he was going to use this property. It was like 1.5 miles of oceanfront in Santa Barbara, California. I mean, my clients tell me about a new ski condo they bought. But they talked about how it was going to impact his family, right? He wanted each of his kids to be able to build a beach house on the property, and they could all kind of have a family commune, if you will, whatever. But that was what I remember. Now, when I got out of law school, I didn't want to work with my grandfather. He was still working at the time. He worked for 53 years, but couldn't get him to quit. But he's still very well known. And I didn't like that feeling of nepotism. We talk about core values, right? My number one core value is independence. I've never liked having a boss, and I didn't want to work with him because we were better friends not working together. And so I joined what's now the largest law firm in the world. It's Denton's, Durham, Jones and Pinniger, their branch here in Utah, and worked there for 7 years. I had a fabulous mentor who was an amazing technician and estate tax planner, and I think very, very highly of him to this day. But he did things different. And this is how I see 98% of my colleagues doing it, because this is how you're taught to do it modern coming out of law school, is it was a factory. You brought a client in, you got what you thought were the pertinent details about their family, right? Basically, one of the first questions you ask is, what is your net worth? Because the idea is what a client really wants to do is they want to package up the most amount of money and pass it on to the next generation. And it's sort of a generational shift that's occurred here. I mean, you go back a couple of generations to my grandpa's generation, right? The greatest generation. Um, they lived through an economic time that we've never felt, right? We lived through the Great Recession. We were all unhappy. I'm not happy about gas prices right now, right? We all really happy about gas prices. They were sitting in soup lines to feed their family, right? The Great Depression was a lot different. And my grandpa had this saying that I always loved. I don't think it was his, but he always said, money isn't everything, but it sure quiets the nerves. And when you're you us as human beings, we're always seeking out safety, and we want to feel comfortable. And if you don't know where you're feeding your family, and then all of a sudden you come out of that and you've got some money in the bank, you're sleeping better, right? It feels nice, it's comfortable, it's warm. And and that's also when sort of financial markets are coming into play, and you can actually have money that doesn't really exist, right? It's a digit. It's not like land that's sitting there and you can feel it. It's sort of out there, but it allowed to fractionalize things, and you can give cash now to kids. And so it's a changing world. And planners, and I'm gonna lump us all under this umbrella of planners. That includes your estate planner, the stuff that I do, tax planners and CPAs, insurance planners, financial planners, life coaches, whatever it might be, this big umbrella of people that you're listening to. They think, or at least they thought back then, that you want to pass the most amount of money because that was comfort onto your kids. It was a loving thing, right? But then you see the effects of that, right? You have the baby boomer generation, arguably the most affluent generation throughout the history of mankind. I mean, in 1930, the deficit, I think, was $15 billion. What is it, $36 trillion today? There's been a lot of spending that's gone on since 1930, 90 years. And so that generation was able to think about other things, right? The priority wasn't having to worry about where they were feeding themselves. They got to think about social change. And you have the 60s and positive, obviously great things that went on in those dynamics, but the culture was thinking different. And then you get into the next generation, and I'm including myself in this, right? The Generation Xers. I turned 50, so we're now, for whatever reason, in control of things. We're now the stewards of the assets in a lot of situations. Mom and dad still, well, my dad actually passed, but my mom's still alive, but she doesn't want to do a whole lot, and I don't blame her. She was a single mom for a while and had a had a life of her own, and had to deal with my grandpa as her dad, which is a whole nother element to it. But I make a lot of decisions, and I'm going in my brain. I see the value of money. I like money. It lets me do what I want. It lets me feed my family. It lets me go on vacations. It lets me enjoy my life, right? Um, but I also see the problem with unharnessed wealth and what it can do. We've all seen, we talk about it as the trustafarians in our book, or the trust fund babies, or I heard this great term the other day on a panel I was sitting on, where the guy said, I don't want my kids to become waiters. And it's nothing to do with the food industry, right? I did some waiting on tables in college, and it was some of the worst work I ever had to do. But what they're talking about is you don't want your children's estate plan to be waiting for you to die. And so I guess that's why the kind of the formal firm approach, this big firm, didn't feel good to me. It didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. I saw what happened. I mean, I saw heirs with substance abuse problems, and I mean, I can tell stories you would shudder at. But So I left after 7 years at Durham Jones and went out on my own for about a year and a half. I thought I could do it, and I just got too busy that I needed to pair up. So that's when I joined a medium-sized firm, and that's where I met David. I mean, David and I knew each other. We're both past presidents of the estate planning section of the bar, and it's a pretty small estate planning world here in Utah. But we we were dealing with a contentious family situation. I was representing one family that wanted to fight against the side of the family that he represented, and we were sending the mean letter, lawyer letters back and forth to each other. And I just called him up and I said, "Look, let's go to lunch and see if we can just work this thing out." 15 minutes later, we did. He laid it out what his clients really wanted. I laid it out what I want. We got it figured out, and we spent the rest of the time talking about our practices. And I was telling him I was drowning, and he's like, "I'll come over and join our firm." So I went over, joined that, was there for about another 6 years. And then David and I decided to start our current firm. So that was in 2013, now 13 years ago, York Howell. The idea being we wanted to be a boutique estate planning firm. We didn't want to do everything. I was tired of large law firms. I didn't like the dynamics that I experienced in the ones that I had been at. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, how you're looking at it's grown. And David and I still own the firm, but we have, I think 25 lawyers that now work with us. And we have 9 estate and tax attorneys just, dedicated to that type of work. We try to hire people smarter than us. We have, lawyers with masters and degrees in taxation from Northwestern and Georgetown. And I think we're the largest estate practice in Utah at this point in time. Now, we also have added in our firm, we have a corporate section because a lot of our clients are business owners. And then we have a real estate section because one of the larger assets, if not the larger assets that a lot of our clients own, is real estate. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So, but yeah, that's sort of where my background came into saying, look, how it's being done formally, 98% of the time, where you have a cookie cutter trust that says when mom and dad die, it goes to the kids, maybe held for a while until they're 25 or 30, and then it's just going to give it all to them at that point in time. Well, there's a whole lot of problems with that. And then with a lot of the, I think, people that are going to be listening to your program here, if they have land, well, how does that get divided? And then, with ranching and farming families, you have some kids that are more involved in the operations than others, and some want to move out of town and go to the big city. And all of these, the ranching families, they face the issues of success because they're on paper very, very wealthy now because of the property that they own. So we have all of the tax problems that come along with that. They have the emotional attachment to the land. Man, I don't have any emotional attachment to the stocks I have in my stock portfolio, right? It's a lot different than that land that you put your time, treasure, and talent into for years and years and years, as did your parents, as did your grandparents, right? It's different meaning in that kind of a legacy asset. So it's a harder even decision for them. So David and I came to the realization, this was in 2015, that we needed to identify what families were doing well. Because there are families that can successfully navigate this from one generation to the next. And our first book we wrote in 2015 was called Entrusted: Building a Legacy That Lasts. And in that, we go through and identify principles that entrusted families identify and clearly adopt. And the very first one is that entrusted families, they know who they are and what they believe. And that used to be something that families knew. I mean, you had maybe a family motto, a family crest, a family brand, right? In the ranching world, it meant something. And then a lot of these, we have I call it a small ranch, and everybody listening to me is going to get mad because it's only 30 acres. And I think you're not allowed to say it unless it's less than 1,000, but it's up in Southwest Montana, and I love it. It's just outside of Dillon, Montana. And I love the town because everybody knows everybody, and it means something to have a certain name, right? Roads are named after your family name, all that kind of thing. But with families nowadays, everybody's disjointed, right? We're on our devices. We're not connected. We don't really talk a whole lot. We're not having family dinner together any longer. And so when we wrote Entrusted, I thought 2 people might read it. My mom, maybe, but definitely my high school English teacher, because she'd never believe I could read a book, let alone write one. But it had a pretty good response. But what people, I think, came back feedback wise with us after they read it was, now what? right? These are all good ideas, but how do we actually implement this? And the way you implement it, the way you take the first step is to start the discussion. So back then, this is now, what is this, 11 years ago, we developed a game called Rivets. Okay. And it was a trading card game, and it was basically a 44 card deck of different values, these 44 values. And we wrote Riveted in 2018. And I know you asked about that first, but we'll get to that, but it's kind of this weird chronology. The problem with this Rivets game is it took families about 5 hours to play. And it was great. I mean, you wound up knowing exactly what your top five core values were, but what family can get together for 5 hours to do anything? So over the course of the last 11 years, it's taken a number of different iterations, and we're now in kind of version 3.0. We have a whole separate company. It's called COREnology software. It's a software as a service company because law firms, financial planners, they're really wanting to have these conversations with their clients, or maybe they're not wanting to, they're having to. I haven't had a client in 15 years come into my office and say, you know what I want to do, Andrew? What I really want to do is just set up my kids for failure. I want to create trust fund babies and make sure that they have no motivation in life. My grandpa said there's really three things that you have to be truly happy in life. Something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for. And what happens with these trust fund babies is they don't have any of those, right? They don't really find anybody that they love or loves them for why they want them to love them. I mean, a lot of time these trust fund babies see their value as the money they inherited. I have a personal story on this. When I got out of high school, I went to the University of Utah, joined a fraternity. Don't hold that against me. But it was fun back then. But a couple of years into the fraternity, I had a little brother coming in. Not my little brother, but they called a little brother in the fraternity house. And you're supposed to kind of, take him under your wing and show him the ropes and all that kind of stuff. My little brother, when he turned 18, was worth $175 million. He was part of a big grocery company or family that owned a grocery store that sold for like 600 million. And through some gifting, his dad had given he and his brother basically half the company. He was a fun guy to be around. I mean, I remember going down with him. I was 20 years old. He was 18. And I watched him put his Black American Express card down on a brand new Ferrari F360 that we drove out that day. I mean, I thought it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. This 18-year-old could buy my dream car. Now, fast forward to today, he's not on this planet. A couple of years ago, he was found deceased by his maid, and lying next to him were his two Rottweilers, and he never got married. I mean, his whole life, all he put out there was money, and everybody that came into his life, he never got married. He never trusted them, probably wisely, maybe in that situation. He started businesses, probably 12 or 15 different businesses, but he didn't put any of his heart or soul into it. He just threw money at it. And I think he opened restaurants and they all failed. So he never really had anything to do. So no one to love, nothing to do. And, what's there to hope for if you have everything you ever wanted? You don't really have to do anything with it. So that's the thing that we're trying to avoid with that in terms of identifying those core values. Now, since then, this COREnology software that we have, it takes 20 minutes for mom and dad to do it. It takes 10 minutes for each of the kids to do it. And then you've seen it, right? It gives a good barometer of, well, I think you use it, right? So it's, core
Yeah,
values
I
and
do.
core culture and all of these
Mhm.
measurements of the family dynamic that are so critical. Now, what we came back then in 2018 and we wrote Riveted, 44 Values That Change the World, is we wanted to focus deeper on the connection of values and life experience and how it really gets formed for people to understand that. And then with each of those 44 values, right, we look at some historical figure that exemplified that value, and we give a story and that background on it. And the interesting thing about core values and life experience is they're 100% intertwined, right? Your core values are 100% developed by your life experience. And if I told you what my top 5 core values are, you're going to think that they're admirable. If I found out yours, I would think that they're admirable. But there is a 1 in 15 million chance that we're going to have the same top 5 core values. And it's because we've just lived different lives. mean, I told you my top one was independence. Number two, sometimes it's number one, depending upon how I'm feeling. Number two is honesty. Now I can pinpoint that to a T for when that came about. That's because early on in our family dynamics, there was a member of our family that was, let's say, extremely dishonest with us. And it's caused family dynamics that we're still dealing with today, right? Certain people don't talk to each other and they don't want to sit next to each other at Thanksgiving. And my kids, I give my kids a lot of grief on calls, and I think my clients think my kids aren't really that smart, but they're good kids. And they see this, right? They know what's going on. But if I'm sitting down with my family and I'm able to express to them honesty being one of my core values and why that is, what am I doing? I'm explaining who we are, right? That this member of the family was really dishonest. This is the effect that it had. I'm not being dictatorial. I'm not being preachy. I'm just saying that it's one of my core values. It's not my personality. It's not what I project to the world. It's how I truly operate. Now that tells them how to deal with me, right? You wreck my car. I'm not going to be happy about it, but I've got insurance. If you lie to me about it, I'm going to go nuclear, right? And you think about that with each member of the family and then the family as a whole. Well, now we have the guiding light. Um, Another way that I analogize this in some of my presentations is most families are set up where mom and dad are at the center, right? They're the nucleus. They're holding everything together. They're the gravity. Everybody's going to mom and dad's house for Thanksgiving, and right, coordinated through mom. And it's also kind of the king and queen, matriarch, patriarch model. Well, our belief is that you need to move from that to a representative republic model, or instead of mom and dad being at the centerpiece, you take them out and you put them on orbit with the rest of everybody else. You can still have control. I'm not telling mom and dad to give up control, but instead what you put at the centerpiece is the core values and the purpose in which this is all being done. Another friend of mine, he wrote a book a year after we did called What Would the Rockefellers Do? His name's Garrett Gunderson. And he's a great client of mine, good friend of mine, and I think very, very highly of him. And he talks about this in his book, because thankfully he credits me in his book with helping him develop his estate plan. But he talks about this as a family constitution, right? That your family is setting up the constitution for how the family is going to be managed. And I like that analogy, but what that makes me think of is the United States Constitution. And I think it's maybe a combination. What the core values stuff is, and the COREnology report really is the Family Declaration of Independence, right? It's who we are, what we believe. That's never changed throughout American history, where the American Constitution's been amended, 26 times. So, and that's important. You need to have the governance. That's another one of our chapters in Entrusted, is that entrusted families develop dynamic family governance. Determining who is going to be in charge, what are they going to be in charge of, and how are decisions all going to be made. That's all the Constitution is doing. But this is setting up the family again for that first principle of really coming to terms with who they are and what they want to pursue. So that's what made David and I kind of write the books, and then COREnology kind of just developed as a byproduct for people wanting to have the discussion and being able to facilitate that within families in an efficient way. And I don't know of another program like ours that does it so efficiently.
No, I don't either. And just to support what you're saying is, I know that in my family's own land transition, we fought with it for three years from 3 different states. And finally, once we realized, the legacy or the values we wanted to honor, and figured out the current and future value of the land, all the decisions were easy from that point. And we did it cohesively as a family. And
was that why the upper generation was alive, or did you do that after the passing of the upper generation?
We did it after the passing of the upper generation, or the patriarch.
It is kind of a different dynamic, because I'm not discounting what you did. The fact that you guys could navigate that it's an institution to your family. Obviously you guys have a good family to be able to navigate that. We have a saying in the estate planning world that you never truly know a person until you share an inheritance with them. So the fact, but the decision maker, the patriarch, who may, I'm not saying you guys didn't have an attachment to that land, but it could be that they had a bigger attachment to that land. I see that a lot of times where, no, you're not selling this over my dead body. And then when the kids see the check for how much that land is actually worth now, well, do they want to still milk cows? And I don't blame that. I certainly think that I'm dealing with a family in Montana right now. I'm licensed in huge land states, right? Montana, Wyoming, Idaho,
Texas.
Utah, Arizona, and Texas, and soon to be
Yeah.
Tennessee. So I deal with a lot of ranching families, and I'm dealing with one right now up in Montana, and they kind of have three businesses, but let's say it's two. They're a well-known Black Angus beef distributor, both selling cattle as well as breeding and a whole bunch of things. And there's multifacets to that business, right? But then they have huge ranches. They have a number of big ranches in Montana, and then they have actually a really big ranch in New Zealand. And there's two boys and a daughter. And what there's going to happen when mom passes is each one of the boys is going to take one of the ranches in Montana. The daughter's going to take the ranch in New Zealand. Now, what's lucky about that family is all three of them are in the cattle business. They're all ranchers. But how do you make the daughter whole if she doesn't want to worry about raising Black Angus beef anymore, right? She doesn't want to move to New Zealand. I've never been to New Zealand. I would love to go, but what if she didn't want to do that? So they lucked out. But what about these families that don't have that scenario? Do you sell the property in New Zealand and lose out on the appreciation that might have? I don't know what the market is like in New Zealand. I know that they're not, God's not making any more land, so my bet is that it's growing in value. Do you lose that valuable chicken that's laying the golden, or the goose that's laying the golden eggs? Do you kill it and send off the money? Maybe. So it's really difficult decisions for these ranching and farming families to have. And so I'm not discrediting what you guys were able to do as a family, but a lot of times it is when that roadblock kind of moves on.
And that's why I created Rooted Range. And what I'm doing
There you
as
go.
far as a land advisory that also focuses on, we spoke with David about it. Is the land your legacy, or is it the lift to your true legacy? And I think that's why I find it so valuable. And in our case, we did sell the land, but my father specifically wanted it to be a city park. And so we were able to accomplish that. So
Love it.
We honored his legacy in that respect. But anyway.
Well, there's so many neat things that you can do with land. Land is so unique. And, when they talk about, when you go through real property class in law school, they really kind of explain what land really is. And what property is. It's not just one thing. It's a bundle of rights.
True.
Right? You have the right to occupy the land. You have the right to make improvements on the land. You have the right to farm the land. You have the right to drill for oil on the land or get minerals and gold out of the land, right? There's all of these bundles of rights. And I can give you one of those rights and keep the rest, right? I can give you the ability to occupy it even though I still own it. And that makes land, with like conservation easements and some other things that you can do, and putting the property in conservation that can never be developed, because a lot of people want that, right? They want to keep and preserve the beauty of that land that they hold so dear. I'm preaching to the choir, so
that's
we're
okay.
kindred spirits here.
And there are a lot of us out there, so yes. Well, and speaking of land and conservation, let's talk about two of those wonderful examples you used in Riveted that relate to land, the Claude Monet and the Roosevelt stories. I think those were fascinating and eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and when we were talking last week, kind of in preparation for the meeting, I think I told you this. I probably told you a lot of this, so you're hearing all of this again. But when David and I were writing Riveted, we got to kind of pick the values that we wanted to write on. And he took half and I took half, and those two, Roosevelt and Monet, were both my choices for personal reasons. One is my grandfather fancied himself a painter. He just that's what he did to unwind. He would go home and my grandma hated it because he'd get paint all over their living room. And in fact, there was still paint there until we sold his place. But um, and he was good, but they aren't the greatest. But we all have these faux Monets and water lilies sitting in our bathrooms in our houses, and with the Max Lewis signature. And so I love art myself. I was a political science major, but I also I almost did a minor in fine art photography, and I collect fine art photography, and I've donated a lot to the Museum of Fine Arts at the University of Utah. And so I've appreciated, and Monet is such a fantastic story, like a lot of these artists are, right, where they aren't really appreciated until they're gone. And I've always been haunted by that, because in sort of a remorseful way, it's kind of how I feel about my grandpa. I didn't think he was as cool when he was alive as I do now. And but Monet wasn't appreciated really, and he never really made a lot of money from anything. And he fought and he fought and fought and fought to continue to be an artist, and he didn't care what got in his way. And in painting all of these things, as I think you point out, he's built elaborate sets to be able to paint those things. It was just the artistry was of utmost importance, and everything fell by the wayside, right? What he was doing is he was marking his life against his core value of artistry. Some issue or some conflict comes up in his life, and he's got to make a decision about which road to take at the fork. Well, he's going to take the one that leads to the more artistic realm. And so, yeah, I mean, that was sort of an easier one. I mean, pick an artist for artistry, right? And Roosevelt was my pick as well, because I'm an outdoor. I'll be outdoors anytime that I can. I've been fly fishing since I was 3 years old. I guided in college for a fly shop out of West Yellowstone. We have our place up in Montana that sits on 3/4 of a mile of the Beaverhead River, which is a fabulous trout river. I'll be outside anytime that I possibly can. I love to hunt. I'm not as successful hunting as I am fishing, which the deer in our area are thankful for. But I really like it. And Roosevelt has always been dear to my heart because he's preserved a lot of the places that I love to go. Um, we have another side of our family, and we own half of a cabin in Island Park, Idaho, which is about 60 miles or 30 miles south of West Yellowstone in and of itself. And so we'd go to the park regularly. I would guide in the park all the time for the guiding services, and Yellowstone and the Firehole River and all these things it's, if you've been to Yellowstone, right, it's just this amazing place.
Yeah.
Well, we have that thanks to Roosevelt and other places. And that's a legacy. I don't remember what bills he signed into law. I mean, there were big ones, right? But I couldn't give you the name of them. But I can tell you about the national monuments and things that he's designated. Utah's a huge state. I mean, the federal government owns about 75% of our land. We have beautiful national parks here in Utah. So I love the fact that he said, okay, because some trip to Yosemite that he falls in love with it. What he's going to do is start designating these places as land for everybody, right? I want to protect my land. I don't want anybody coming on our property there in Montana. I mean, I've been moving pipes all last week trying to get the water going on the crop. I plant 20 acres, and it's not because I want to make money. It's to bring the deer in. But hopefully the game wardens don't listen to this. But that's not baiting. That's farming. That's farming.
Okay.
But I move pipes, and I don't, but I don't want anybody else coming onto my field and ruining my planning and so forth. I want to put up a fence. But it's nice to know that with the amount of taxes that we pay as US citizens here, there are places that we can all go, we can all enjoy. We don't have to get landowner permission. We can go and do that. And, they're beautiful places. They're free of garbage. They're well taken care of. They might be too many people in Yellowstone these days, but what can you do about that? So those were two people that kind of not just exemplified the value itself, but I would think are probably their core values. I mean, at least I see those core values in them. That's an
Mhm.
interesting thing. One thing that you may want to do sometimes, Sonia, is have a client play or do COREnology in the reverse. So the husband does it as if they're the wife. So what core values do they see in each other? It is
Good idea.
extremely powerful because it's not going to be the same five that she sees in herself. And if you know, my wife and I have done this. I've gone through and I said, look, honey, this is a value bring to our family. And why? What are the things throughout our 23 years that you've stuck it out with me that has made me think that you bring this incredible value to the family? I mean, what a powerful conversation that is.
Mhm.
You know, we may have talked about or this with Gretchen and David, but we've been in talks with a dating online dating platform here in Utah. It's for the LDS Church. It's called LDSsingles.com, and one of the things that the youth are facing right now is they can't communicate. They go on dates and they don't know what to talk about. And so the thought is on this is, hey, look, before we go on a date, let's just go through the one module of core values. Let's find out what my five core values are. Let's find out what yours are. Bring that to the date and we'll talk about it. We'll kind of say, hey, why is that my core value and so forth. And I mean, what a great first date, right? It's already a
Yeah.
planned out conversation. And then I've had a lot of clients recently before their kids get married wanting their in-laws, their daughter-in-law, their son-in-law to go through this and get clear about their core values as well. So it's just this whole other dynamic, and these aren't new ideas. I mean, going back through our human history and culture, families did this, right? Your job was to raise your kids, not to be wealthy, but to take over your business or your land or whatever. And it's really only been within the last 100 years that this monetization has turned and given us the ability to fractionalize and move into digit thinking and how we do planning. This is really just getting back to basics and saying, hey, we're going to prepare that next generation for the wealth, not just preparing the wealth for the next generation, right? That's the second principle of entrusted families. So, yeah, I can talk in
Yeah.
paragraphs, Sonia. Apologize.
Oh, no, that's all right. That's quite all right. Yeah, you've actually you've talked about estate planning as values expression. Did you want to go through that a little bit more with any other examples?
Well, couple of examples. A lot of families will have some sort of charitable intent, or it maybe depending upon what that value materializes as. Is it generosity? Is it whatever? Maybe it's religious based. Maybe it's a combination of things. And I had this. I was speaking down in Austin actually a couple months, well, about 6 months ago, and this gentleman went before me, and he's an eye doctor, very very successful eye surgeon, and he every year as his kids were growing up, he and his wife started doing this before they had kids, but they would go down to, it's just outside of Ensenada, Mexico, and they would build homes and schools and so forth and improve communities. And then as they had kids, the kids would go down and do this in the summer, and then the kids are older and they've gotten married and their spouses are coming down and now they're on grandchildren. This has just become an amazing element for their value of generosity to do what? Well, it's creating communication. I mean, everybody's doing this together. They're having a good time doing it. They're going down and making something better in the world. I think having something above the family to strive for is always a good thing, and creates some gratitude. They're doing business with each other. And this idea that families shouldn't do business with each other, I've never understood that. I'd be ecstatic if my kids wanted to do business with each other. I know sometimes it doesn't happen, but at least with this, they're all getting together. And in their estate planning, they have it that trip will continue to be paid for. Every year, the members of the family can go down and do this thing in Ensenada because, or they could, I guess, choose a different location, but basically making improvements in impoverished areas. So that's their generosity value coming to fruition. Um, and some you kind of have to look at your personality and match it up with your values, because I have generosity as well in our family, and we want to benefit some charitable organizations. I have no business swinging a hammer. Okay, I shouldn't go to Ensenada and build a house because the house will fall down in the next storm. So I'd rather write a check. Okay, now is that lazy? I don't know. I worked pretty hard to make that money. That check stands behind, and I'm still benefiting somebody. And so somebody who's, more of an introvert like me and doesn't want to do fundraising or be involved, actively in going down and building houses because they shouldn't be, I can still express that value of generosity through making charitable donations or whatever it might be. So the values can express themselves in a number of different ways. Another just example, one of the things that one of our top five values as a family is entrepreneurialism. Okay. Yes, I'm a blood-sucking lawyer, but I also fancy myself an entrepreneur. And we started our firm, and it's been fun to watch that grow. And we started COREnology, and it's been fun to watch that grow. And I want to encourage that within my family. But I'm not going to do at my death what I know for an absolute certainty I'm not going to do during my life. And during my life, if one of my kids came to me and said, Dad, I had this amazing business idea, get involved with me or give me a bunch of money, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, look, tell me about the business. Because there's very few things that I do well in this world, but business structuring and tax planning, that might be one of the things that I do well. So bring it to Dad. Let's talk about it. Maybe let's get other advisors involved. Let's get the best business plan that we can to give us the best shot at this being a viable business endeavor. And then if I determine that it is, I'm not going to give you the money, because another one of our core values is accountability. Right? I'm going to loan you the money, and you're going to be held accountable to come back and explain what's gone on with that loan you got from our family bank. And people talk about family banking. I hear this concept all along, but and what that's going to require is at our quarterly family meetings where we meet, and my kids sit in on the financial meetings with accountants and everything where we talk about stuff, and they're free to ask questions. But we dedicate a whole afternoon for them to tell us what's gone on with that loan. How's everything going? Did you lose the money? And I know they're going to lose money. We all have, right? And anybody that says they haven't is lying to you. But I don't want all of my kids to make the same mistake. I want them learning from each other. And if one of them makes a mistake, well, the other two learn that that's not something that they want to do. I want to encourage them to maybe do things with each other. And I want that money to come back to the family bank so I can support other loans for other beneficiaries. So that's like how I would manifest that goal of entrepreneurialism within my estate planning. You have to line up the intangible assets, which is the family values and the purpose and the family constitutions. Those are all intangible things. Line that up with the tangible assets, the money, the land, the business interests, and you absolutely can do it. It's just there's a lot of apathy, and I don't blame people for it. I mean, only 30% of the population does any estate planning at all, let alone talking about these higher level things. Now, I will say that it's dramatically increasing in the demand for conversation about it, but and maybe more people are doing it. Probably more people have done it that listen to your podcast than others, the average population. But even if somebody's done it, our research has been it's been about 18 years since they've even looked at it. Life's busy, you're raising kids, you're making sure the crops are planted, and in the back of your mind that you ought to do a will or a trust, or you go in for I always get calls when somebody's going in for a medical procedure, or they're going on a vacation. Right? We got to get our estate planning done, and getting over that level of apathy is sometimes difficult. Knowing that death and taxes are two certainties in life is sometimes a good motivator, and I'm a big fan of planning. But that goes without saying.
Yeah, well, that's one thing too that I think is kind of exciting about being a landowner at the crossroads. You're in a transition or transformation stage, and it just is a perfect time to go ahead and do some planning, estate planning for that asset, because maybe you realize you have more than you thought you did, or
with landowners. So I've seen true wealth generated, I have kind of this unique window in how people have made money, right?
Yeah.
And it's really comes down to two things. One of them not being the stock market, right? I have not had anybody that probably didn't know too much make a lot of money in the stock market, right? It might be a good place to store money. And once you have a lot, it can then be put to work and make a lot more money. But the average person who's just investing in their 401k doesn't necessarily come out real wealthy. It's a good storage. Where I see wealth being generated is in land. Goes without question. Nobody can deny that the ranch that was homesteaded, right, the 360 original acres that was homesteaded by grandma and great grandma and grandpa is worth more now than it was then.
Yeah.
It's probably worth a whole lot more than it was worth 20 years ago, right? And you know, the other group is the business owner, right? Somebody that starts a company and it does really well and they own it, but on paper it's worth millions of dollars. These another ranching family I have in Montana. I may have told you the story as well. They have 3 homesteaded parcels that they've had forever, right? And about, I think it's now been 15, 16 years ago, maybe even longer than that, Ted Turner bought bought a property right next to theirs, and it's half the size of their property. And he paid $25 million for that property. Well, how do they value property? It's through comparable, and we have a really good comparable. These guys are worth $50 million on paper. I think that their ranching does about 350,000 in gross revenue. So they're the pretty poor multimillionaires. But they're going, look, if we could get a check for $50 million, we can do a lot with that. We don't have to work as hard as we are any longer. The kids don't have an interest in the business. We can provide for them, and we can give them business loans to go and start their own life passion, whatever it might be. I'll tell you, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have that economic problem myself, but it's a problem, right? You know, it's that old saying, "More money, more problems." It's just, and the quicker you can get in and do the planning, the better. I mean, the estate tax, which can really negatively affect landowners, right? That tax that when you die, the federal government and some states want to tax you again. And under current law, federally, right, everybody, each person can give 15 million tax-free during their life or at death. So a married couple can pass 30 million of assets onto their next generation entirely estate tax-free. But I don't know how you view the world. Personally, I don't think the government is going to need less money in the future. And I think taxes are going to go up. And when this political pendulum shifts back to Democrat, which it will at some point, they're going to change this law. This big, beautiful bill that was passed last summer. And, Trump, like him or hate him, it means you're going to pay less in taxes over the last 3 years. Now, I like not paying taxes.
Yeah.
Now, when I started practicing law 25 years ago now, the amount you could pass to your family was only 600,000 tax-free with a 55% tax on anything over and above that. And as you know, that tax is owed 9 months following date of death, and it has to be paid in cash. The government does not accept parcels of land as payment. So you're having to sell your 360-acre ranch in a year, and you want to find a buyer that's going to pay you $50 million for that. It's not a lot of buyers. There's probably a buyer, but we got to wait some time. So, the sooner that we can get on that, I mean, this is 100% a negligence tax. We have an arsenal of tools available for people to
That's
get us
right.
stinking wealthy. We just got to get in there and do it. I mean, in 2001, I don't think people who fear taxes like I do. Well, I don't fear taxes. I just don't like them. But people who hate taxes like I do, they were really keen to this in 2021. Kind of slipped under the radar, but we were one senator away from having all of, a lot of our estate tax planning tools and the exemption amount completely going down with the passage of the tax law that was being proposed at that time. So this is going to happen. It will happen. And the sooner we can get in there, the better.
Well, yeah, and that's just another reason why landowners should look at least that portion right away.
Yeah,
Because there
I feel
are
like
tools to help. You're right.
there are, and what I love about kind of the new world we live in is the ranchers are branching out. mean, I still see all the time these families that have worked with the local Edward Jones office for their entire, generation of their families. And I'm nothing against Edward Jones. But at some point in time, a $50 million client needs a little bit more sophistication than
Mhm.
Edward Jones.
Mhm.
And, there's not always a lot of, state planners local in the area. Selfishly, one of the reasons I got licensed in Montana was to be able to write off my trips up to our ranch in Montana. Don't tell me that. Now that's legal because I actually work up there and I meet clients and so forth. But
Of
there's not a
course.
lot of estate lawyers that aren't in one of the bigger cities. Like I
Mhm.
think the closest one that is even a member of the Actech College is at not in Dillon. I think they're probably out of Butte. And Butte, I love Butte, but I don't know if it's necessarily the big city. So I like the fact that I can talk with clients on Zoom and be able to help. I mean, I can help
Mhm.
anybody in any state. The way that
Mhm.
the American Bar Association rules work on this is I can represent anybody. It doesn't matter where they live. It matters where I'm practicing law.
Mhm.
And then the second requirement is that I have to be able to do the work competently. And I think that's a really sad requirement that they put in there. But after 25 years of doing this, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And if there's a legal issue that comes up affecting a client's planning that I'm not the lawyer to help with, I'm the first one to say so. But yeah, the rancher I think now has many more tools available to them to really dive in and having a much more sophisticated plan than they've had in the past.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. Well, the only other thing I might like to talk about, which you've talked about quite a bit, is COREnology. Is there anything else you want to say about that tool?
No, again, I think that if you're already exposing the people and your clients that you're
I
working
am.
with to it, then you already understand its value. I'll say this: I mean, at this point in time, we've had now over 3,000 people go through it. Well, it's been like 700 families or something like that. Um, we've never had one negative comment, not one negative feedback, not one family that hasn't found it transformational. I haven't personally been part of any families that I've worked with on it. There haven't been tears expressed, sometimes big tears expressed, family, you know, obstacles mended, greater communication, and there's just not a more efficient way to do it. Right. I mean, what happens with COREnology is mom and dad each get an email and it's a
Mhm.
link that they click on, right? It takes you to the survey. It's a, learning software. It starts to anticipate your answers. Kids get an email the same and, everybody does it independently. So we're not influencing answers. And it's surprisingly telling. I don't know how you found in terms of accuracy here, but I don't know if I can remember a time when I've gone through the top 5 core values with mom or dad, and one of them hasn't said, "That is absolutely you to a T."
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
and that becomes your guidepost. I mean, it helps you make decisions so much easier. We do this at the corporate level where companies will get clear about what their company core values are. That helps them make a business decision. I may have told you this story as well, but we did this for a company here in Utah. They're a manufacturing company. They make the top product in the industry by far. The next competitor is way lower in rating. It costs a lot less, don't get me wrong, but their product, lasts twice as longer, all the good stuff. So they had this opportunity to do some outsourcing in manufacturing, and it would have made them a lot of money. But one of their core values, in fact, I think it is their top core value, is excellence. So they were struggling for like 6 months over whether or not they should do this and presenting it to the shareholders and what would that mean and all of this kind of stuff. Well, we were able to say, look, if you do this deal, the next day, can you say that's still your top core value? And they said, nope, done. We're not doing it. So it's a guidepost. You get to kind of run the family decision making up that core value tree and just make sure that it's in alignment.
And along those same lines, I've been in sales for years. And of course, you know of the DISC survey. Well,
Hmm.
there's never been an interview where I haven't had to take that. And when I was on an arts council, we also took the DISC survey. And I thought that was odd, but one thing that it was so interesting, there was one woman on the Arts Council that was always contrary to what I would say. And
there's always that one, right?
Yeah, and it would be so aggravating. But then once I understood and read her DISC and understood her values and where she was coming from, I realized that she was actually a compliment to me. And I think that's what's really important in knowing your other family members, is knowing a little bit more about their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, you'll love them just the same, but just to understand where they're coming from. As a matter of fact, I remember, I'm a big fan of Mel Robbins and her podcast. She was saying that when she first introduced her mom to her fiance, her mother was not real excited. And so Mel thought, well, what's the conflict here? And her mother finally admitted, well, he lives in the Northeast and we live in Michigan. And I just understand if you marry him, I won't see you as much as I thought I might. And so that totally changed Mel's attitude as far as her empathy towards her mom and her feelings. And so I just think there's a lot to that. And
it's incredibly important. Incredibly important.
You know, just like you were talking about in the legal profession, here in real estate, we talk about highest and best use. Well, one problem person in that decision can throw everything away. But if you...
Well, can I stop there for just 1 minute? Because that's a really important point that I don't want to lose. And I want people to understand that, because in modern or in kind of traditional estate planning, highest and best use is a standard, right? You theoretically, you couldn't have a trustee who never sells the property, that's not making money. It's just sitting there stagnant and wallowing away. You have to make productive use of it. And some of the trust rules, unless you change them voluntarily, say the trustee needs to make the most money with that asset. Meaning, if it's not farming any longer, they need to sell the property and take the money and do something better with it, right? Requiring the sell. And like you're saying, all it requires is one member of the family to start squeaking and force that sell in the court system. Now, with more kind of modern trust theory, some states are now allowing people to set up trusts for stated purposes. Normally, you set up a trust for the benefit of a person. Now you can set up a trust for the benefit of a purpose. Maybe that purpose is to preserve the family farm for as long as it possibly can be. And then going back to the coworker scenario, we always have that coworker that's in our side, but I do my core values stuff with my whole team. I know what each of my paralegals and my associates, all of their core values. If I'm onboarding somebody, I'm hiring them, they're taking the core value survey. I'm not doing DISC, they're doing COREnology. Right. So yeah, I mean, we're saying the same thing. I probably made you get off track in what you were going to say next.
Well, no.
Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Oh, well, of course. But the only thing that I was going to say is I have seen just one other organization talk about the relational aspects of ownership and decision-making for the land, the relational values. And so anyway, I think it's kind of exciting how some of my tools are also developing in a way that really complements that, you know. And
it's a changing industry. We're all hearing this from our clients. Again, our clients are asking for something more. They don't. They want something that meets their desire. I mean, they don't want to split up the family. They don't want to just dump it onto the kids without any kind of protection. Nobody wants that any longer. And our industry, especially the estate planning industry, is still pushing that. I can't tell you how many trusts that I read that have been done by some other attorney, and it's just boilerplate. It looks like everybody else's. All they did was copy and paste the name out of it. They obviously didn't talk about any of these issues about family dynamics and special things that are going on and what makes everybody tick. And So it's a huge thing that is being demanded for in the marketplace, and everybody is dragging their feet. Lawyers don't want to talk about this with their
Yeah.
clients, and they probably shouldn't. Not the best bedside manner. Lawyers are 50 years behind the times. David and I were doing this AI thing, and we were talking to some attorneys about, what are they using AI for? What tools? Because we have 5 different AI programs that we use. And I do more research now than I've ever done my entire legal career, just because it is so easy to do it now. What makes me a better lawyer? So these guys are saying we don't use any AI. I'm like, what? Man, I know it's only been a couple of years now, but get on board, because it's going to take you over. I don't think it's going to mean you're out of a job tomorrow, but if you don't implement it, it means you're going to be out of a job tomorrow.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know
Yeah.
how I've got off on that tangent, but
I probably helped.
I think that like with the COREnology report and the software and the learning abilities that it has in that, and it can interface. That's what we were talking about on the AI stuff. I mean, we think in the future, COREnology could be that phantom trustee, right? You upload everything that Dad's written. I mean, I've uploaded all of my presentations, the book. I mean, I've recorded Zoom meetings with clients for the last 6 years. That's all been uploaded to AI, and there's in essence a phantom me out there that my kids could talk to if I were to die. That's kind of spooky, but if you think about in the trust department, you now have me sitting out there as this person on the board, and I would never do this. That sounds pretty egotistical. But I mean, we see this as being kind of this phantom trustee. I mean, when you have that core values proposition from a family, if you were in charge of how money was being doled out for that family, you would have a pretty good guidepost.
Mhm. That's very true.
Anyway, it's changing world. It's fun to
Yeah.
see, I think.
And thank you so much, Andrew. And it's been a pleasure working with you guys for the last year or so, and looking forward to more.
Well, we appreciate you, and thank you for having me on. And yeah, always happy to come on and talk about these things.
This sounds great. Thanks again. We'll talk soon. And
Okay.
Goodbye.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Take care.
Mm.